on Apple Podcasts, and also make sure that you are subscribing to us on Spotify. You can watch the live or the podcast episodes. The video episodes are available on YouTube. The YouTube is just going to be my name, Carlos Dillard. And also make sure you are checking out the links in my bio for all the latest things that we are doing. Right now, we just got back from the West Coast side of our book tour. We went to Las Vegas, we did Portland and Seattle. We still have to hit up LA and Texas on the west side of the coast. But we are taking a little bit of a break for the summer, guys, just to give ourselves a break. But we will be finishing the book tour in the fall. So make sure you keep your eyes out for that, because we may be coming to a city near you. And any other updates, both books are on the TikTok shop, guys. I know we've been really excited for book 2, Word of the State of Word of the State, Abort the Adoption. That is available on the TikTok shop. And if you guys have been missing the lives, we've been going live Monday through Friday again, 9 to 3 on TikTok, to sell the books and also educate and advocate for adoption reform. So if you are listening and you haven't already made sure that you follow me on social media, please do so. All the links are going to be in the show notes as always. So without further ado, I do want to move on to our next guest, Abner. How are you doing, Abner?
I'm doing really good today. How are you?
I am fantastic. So Abner, tell us a little bit about your adoption and how did you get into the child welfare system?
Yeah, I don't really remember. I've been in the foster care system, or I was in the foster care system since I was a toddler. I had the first time I remember, I believe I was 4, and I had my younger brother as well. And I remember we were taken away in the middle of the night, and from then on in foster care until I was 13. So yeah, I know my the reasons we were taken away was because my parents were addicts. They were addicted to meth. My father was the cook and seller, and my mom was a user. Well, my father was a user as well. Um, so I know the reasons why. Um, but every now and then they would get custody back. But it would get taken away within like 6 months. So I was in foster care from as early as I can remember until I was 13.
Okay. And did you stay with your brother during the system, or did you guys get separated?
Well, it was hit or miss. I actually have other siblings as well, but they weren't born the first time I was taken. Um, so the my fully biological brother, we share both mom and dad. We got to stay together occasionally, but we were separated pretty frequently. I do
Okay.
remember at when I was old enough to really start to understand that we were going to get separated, I would start to advocate for ourselves.
Hmm.
Uh, and occasionally I was successful. There were a few times where I was able to convince the foster parents to also take in my brother, or we could go to a group home together. In fact, I actually grew up in Arizona. I don't know if you're familiar. I don't know if it's even still open, but there's a group home out there called Crisis Nursery.
Hmm.
I lived there several times, um, and there was a time where I was able to be there with both my biological brother and my half brother. But my half brother was really young, so he was on the infant side of the group home, and I was very lucky and privileged that the staff members there, they gave me the key code so I could just sneak in
Oh, you go see
between
your brother. That's
the older kid's
nice.
side and go to the yeah.
So, kind of explain a little bit about your experience in foster care that you do remember.
So I mostly remember never having belongings. Uh, the few belongings we did have were always in a trash bag. I know that's a pretty big stereotype that most people at this point know about, but yeah, we don't get luggage, so trash bags it is. Um, I remember Um, sorry, I have a dissociative problem,
You
so I dissociate a lot.
you
But
okay?
I can take a breath. So I mostly remember the moments where we're taken away, those are usually the more traumatic ones, and so they kind of stick out. Um, my siblings were yelling a lot, crying a lot, and I remember being parentified very early on. I wasn't the oldest sibling, but I was the oldest sibling that was like living together. My older siblings were my half siblings, and they got to stay with their biological fathers, so they got to kind of stay out of the system. Um, but so I remember, yeah, just constantly meeting new faces, constantly learning how to adapt, constantly never knowing what was happening, who I was going to be with, who I was going to see, what school I was going to go to. I remember at one point counting, and I had been to over 22 schools. Um, and Yeah, so I guess it kind of just depends. I have a lot of stories I tell when I'm with my friends, like, oh, the when I lived with the lesbian couple, this is what happened, or oh, when I lived with the elderly couple, this is what would happen, or if I was in the respite home, this is what happened, or I also had like a rich family that took me in at one point, and boy, did I want them to adopt me.
Hmm.
Um, so like I have a lot of anecdotal stories about specific foster parents. Um, but Yeah. Sorry, if you have a more
So
specific question, I can get
yeah,
into it.
no worries, no worries. I know it's kind of a weird thing to be at, like, hey, what about your childhood? So in your response when you signed up for the podcast, you said that there were some specific things like some conversations that you wanted to talk about. So being special needs. Um did that ever affect you? Did you ever see that in foster care? Did they ever like lie about your abilities or exaggerate your needs as a child to get more stipends? Or what was your experience with that?
So, it turns out I have had autism and ADHD my whole life.
Hmm.
I did not get diagnosed with those when I was a kid.
Hmm.
My siblings were also in the same boat because it's genetic. So all of my siblings are also somewhere on the spectrum. Um, of course, I never got diagnosed, so I couldn't get any accommodations that would have helped me. My brother did get diagnosed with ADHD, but he also got diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder, which I don't know if you've done any research into, but essentially I don't want to call it a fake disorder, but it's not, the symptoms are more related to having an autistic meltdown than they
Hmm.
are to actually being oppositional, or so my brother had a lot of
Yeah.
tantrums.
Yeah,
uh,
my adopted mother would say, they used to say I had ODD, but it was really just CPTSD, and just a reaction from my
yep,
CPTSDs. So it wasn't that I was trying to
exactly.
be defiant. Or I literally just couldn't function because of trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're also trying to protect yourself. It's a
Yeah.
completely understandable reaction, but when you're a kid, you don't have agency over yourself. And so the parents who are seeing this, or the foster parents who are seeing this, are thinking like, well, they're just acting out and are being difficult. And usually they didn't come at it from a place of understanding and trying to help. They just wanted the kids to act right. So, um, can you restate the question
So
again so I
so
can get back
you
to my point?
so and at one point you did get adopted, correct? Or no?
Yes, when
Yes.
I was 13.
So when
Yeah.
you were 13, so that's
My
more along the lines of like, so when you got adopted from the foster care system, you were already considered special needs. So, did your adoptive parents ever, use your being
Mhm.
special needs to get money? And how did they? We call that stacking in the system. How did you figure out that they were doing that, and how much were they getting? Do you think?
Yeah. So I never learned figures on what they were receiving, but my adopted parents, they adopted me, one of my biological brothers, and then they adopted two other girls. And it's once I separated with them, that's where I stopped following. If they've adopted more, I have no idea. But they I remember coming home from work because I've been working since I was 14. I remember coming home from work one day, and there were papers all over the dining room table. My mom was not sitting at the table at the moment, but I heard her like walking towards the area. But I was looking at the papers on the table, and I could see all kinds of forms stating like temper tantrums, eating, like struggling with eating with food, not doing well in school, being antisocial. Um, so I remember her filling out those forms and stating all those things, and it's kind of weird when I think back on it, because they were technically correct, but I don't feel I don't feel like that is how it should be going about. It shouldn't just be, oh, the parent writes on a form all these things that they think are wrong with you, and then you get more money. We should be going to like get diagnosed so we can get
Yeah, and
accommodations and help.
I also just spoke in Seattle at the what is it, Academy, or so the Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, and I was speaking to them about over medication and over medicating
Hmm.
and taking more time with their clients and the children, especially adoptees and foster youth, and speaking to them and not just pushing pills or pushing pills as a solution. I understand that sometimes Western medicines and like antidepressants and psychotropics can help, but we don't need just that to be the first solution. And a lot of the times they
Exactly.
really didn't have an understanding that these parents who were using these doctor's appointments to get more money just so they could say that you had more emotional problems. So I think it's really important for you to
Yes.
highlight that.
Yeah.
So you were 13 when you got adopted. So what do you say when because people say that's about an age that kids should be able to consent? Did you understand the legal process of what you were about to do when you were 13?
No, I didn't. I didn't know anything when I was 13. I just and at the time I was very especially when it's from such a young age that you've been tossed from family to family, you get tired of that. You want to make roots, you want to stay in one place. And so the parent and my parents had not at that point done the worst of what they were going to do to us. Um and so I didn't know who they were really when they wanted to adopt us. Um I don't think 13-year-olds can fully grasp their I definitely knew that, my biological parents were on drugs, and they were not capable of taking care of me. I understood that. I did not understand the adoption process, what it was, and what it would eventually mean for me as an adult. When I turned 18 and I tried to get my medical records and even just my adoption or foster care records, um, they wouldn't release them to me. So I had no way from then on to be able to accurately give family medical history. So I've had several like DNA tests done when I go to the doctor, so that way they can like figure out if there's any like genetic markers that I need to be aware of, which is really expensive. Um, and for the most part, we just kind of guess. But I actually ended up finding out that I have a lot of genetic conditions that could have been diagnosed a lot sooner had I had access to that information. Um, so yeah, no, I don't think 13-year-olds know what they're getting into when they say, "Yeah, I want these people to adopt me," especially because we usually have such like people-pleasing tendencies, or like a desire to want to fit in with the community, and if these people are going to say and pretend really well that they want me in their community, then I, of course, say to a judge, "Yeah, I want to stay with them." But I
So
also
did your
don't remember
adoptive
even getting asked
parents
that.
were your adoptive parents your foster parents, or did they just adopt you from foster care?
They were my foster parents first.
Okay, and so they fostered you first. And how was that experience
Mhm.
with them? Like, did it change from fostering to adoption? Did they treat you differently after the adoption was finalized? Tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that.
So before we were adopted, um, they weren't quite as mean. I mean, they there were still signs, but I overlooked the red flags. They weren't quite as mean to us. They didn't quite do as many manipulation tactics, and I think honestly part of that is because they didn't really know us very well, and they also didn't really attempt to get to know us very much either. Um, so this actually kind of goes into the thing I wanted to talk about with identity, in that growing up in foster care, when you're trying to please other people, you suppress your own needs and your own identity so that way you can fit in, um, and be accepted by these other people. And so I did not know really a lot about myself or my own interests or anything like that. And then when I was adopted by this family, um, it kind of got even worse because once I did try and I started to be a teenager, I want to learn who I am, try things out. I found out very quickly they didn't like the things I was trying out. I was very into metal music. I liked all things kind of goth, and I still, it's not a phase. I still do. Um, but they were religious extremists, and so any interest in that they considered to be demonic. And so I had a lot of exorcisms done on me. They would take vegetable oil. They would say a
Wow.
prayer over their vegetable oil. Yeah, they'd say a prayer over the vegetable oil to anoint it and call it holy oil. And they'd put a cross on our forehead, and then the whole family would lay hands on us, and my mom would pretend to speak in tongues and pray the demon out. And then after about 45 minutes, she'd like be all sweaty and say, I think that worked. I don't think you have the demons anymore. But then of course a week later it would come by and she'd be like, those demons never left you, and then it'd be back to square one with the exorcisms and stuff. But and that really happened with my younger brother a lot as well too, especially because of the tantrum. She thought that he had a violent demon that was going to, um who even knows, she had a lot of delusions. um and yeah, so there was ability for me to even build an identity because that it would be demonized or criticized. Um, there were a lot of times she'd ask me like, "Oh, what do you want to do when you become an adult?" Poetry. English to do, and she'd always have a reason. I still am working on it with my therapist, and for why I could not do the thing that I had picked out that I wanted to do. For writing, it was, oh well, that's a very niche. Like you have to be an excellent writer, and even people who are really good at writing, they spend their entire lives writing and they never get published. So maybe you should have a backup. Okay, well that's fine. Maybe I should have a backup. And so then I'd pivot, and I thought, well, I really want to help people who are in situations like me. Maybe I could be a therapist. Oh well, I think your heart is too weak for that. I think you're going to end up crying and making it all about yourself, and you probably shouldn't try and help other people. It's going to be too close to home for you. Okay, well, maybe I can help other people. I want to be a forensic scientist. Oh, well, I don't think you do well with the blood and the gore, even though horror films were my favorite. And she used to do exorcisms over me if I would laugh at a scary movie. So just every time I had something I wanted to do, it was never good enough. So I never really got to figure that out. And then as an adult, those people pleasing tendencies didn't go away. I had unpacked all that trauma. So I'm still continuing to make decisions based on other people's opinions and not my own. And so it took me a really long time to figure out what my values and my ethics were and to start living by that. Um, so I feel like I am very far behind in my own identity and knowing who I am than other people are. I could have had my career solidified at this point, had someone supportive. Um, oh, and in fact, even the thing that I was going to go to school for, uh, I couldn't because they wouldn't even co-sign a loan for me to go to college. I got accepted. I had a 50% grant, but I still needed like $12,000 more,
Yeah,
and I
and
wanted
a lot of
to,
folks
so
don't
I needed the
understand that
cosign. They wouldn't.
you need your parents' tax information even to get loans. You need your tax
Hmm.
information and their sign-offs, and it's crazy. So and you said that this is how they treated all the children in their home, right?
Yeah, they also did a lot of us against each other. I ended up being the golden child a lot and the scapegoat quite a bit. And the other kids, who they were a lot more they weren't as people pleasing as I was. They were very much, they got into the system a little bit later, so they knew who their family was, and they knew who they were a little bit stronger than I was, and so they would push back a lot more. And because of that, there was a point, actually, I remember telling my siblings, I said, "Hey, don't tell me anything. Don't tell me your secrets, because our mom will make me tell her, and you guys will get in trouble." There was one time my sister had tried smoking weed, and she told me about it like a year after she had tried it. Um, and I I feel really bad about this, but I remember slapping her and being like, "Why would you do that? Like, you're gonna be in so much trouble." Th and this is such a large secret, but I remember I asked her, I was like, did you do it anymore?" She's like, "No, it was just the one time." And I said, "Okay, good. Like, I'm not gonna tell, but you can't keep doing it, because if I I'm gonna have to, like, I'm gonna get in so much trouble if I don't tell our mom." And then so I was really good at it. I actually didn't tell that secret. But 6 months later, she found out anyways, and then she found out I knew, and I was sleeping. It was in the middle of the night. It was a school night. It was like 1 in the morning, and I hear her yelling. I hear my mom yelling upstairs, and then I hear her stomp down the stairs, and I knew she was coming into my room. And she busts the door open, flips the lights on, and then, like, pulls the covers off me, and it's like, "You knew that your sister did weed and you didn't tell me?" And I was like, "It was over a year ago. Like, what am I supposed to do with something that happened over a year ago?" Um, yeah, so we were all grounded. Everybody got grounded for 2 weeks. We weren't allowed to go out. We weren't allowed to have our phones. We weren't allowed to do anything. That was also, like, they were very big on punishment. They would, spank us, um, but most of the time it was grounding, which for me, I was an introvert, so a lot of times the groundings didn't always they weren't the worst things for me. I would just read, and that's all I ever
Yeah.
wanted to do, was just read anyways. So I just sit in my room and read, but then they caught on to that, and then I wasn't allowed to read books anymore.
That's how
Um
my adoptive parents were. Like they grounded me for, like from like games and movies and TV, and then I was like, okay, I'll just read, and I actually really enjoy reading.
mhm,
So then they grounded me from reading. So then like I just found other things to enjoy. So eventually I would just have to be stuck in a room with nothing in it, just looking at four walls
mhm.
locked inside, and I was like, this is horrible.
Yes. And I think that absolutely contributed to some of the dissociative, like, problems I deal with. Like, okay, if you have nothing else, if you literally have nothing that you can distract yourself with, what are you gonna do? You're gonna go inside your own mind and create a whole world and just live there, because you can't just stare at a wall. Um, yeah. So the she definitely had different ways she would play all of the kids. Um, I was the oldest, and so I was in charge, and if the younger kids messed up, I was in trouble. I grounded. I would have to redo their work constantly as well. There was a lot of we had to do a lot of chores, which I call them chores, but really, like, I don't know what to call it when your whole entire weekend is spent deep cleaning a house from head to every weekend. Like, there you have to not only just pick up after yourself and just, like, do, like, dishes or sweep up the floor, but it goes beyond that. Like, you have to get on your hands and knees, and you have to scrub the grout, because the grout has to be pristine. It has to look exactly the way it did when they first got it put in. You have to scrub all the baseboards. You have to do the light fixtures, the ceiling fan, every nook and cranny. And then also, like,
Wow.
she had a couple of adult children who lived with her as well. Um, and so, like, she treated them a lot differently than she treated us. They would not be involved in the cleaning. They would clean up their own room, and that was it. But her older daughter lived on her own. She was married. She had her own kids. We would go over to her older daughter's house as well, and we would have to deep clean her house, also.
She had you cleaning her
Um,
daughter's house too? Dang. She had some
mhm, mhm. My
employees.
Yes, my friends actually called me Cinderella for a really long time. Um, they knew before I was willing to admit it to myself that I was in an abusive situation. Um, so, so I'm trying to think of more examples and get back on topic, but I've kind of lost
No, you're
lost my
okay. And
train a
this is
little
this
bit.
is the perfect time because we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, guys, we're going to listen to more of Abner's story. We're also going to hear some suggestions that they think would improve the system, like reallocating resources. So, Lifestanders, we'll be right back. And when we get right back, we'll finish Abner's experience in the foster care and adoption systems. Awesome.